Good day everyone, and welcome back to another edition of this data analysis training. Hope you have been good so far. My name is Stanley, and I'll be walking us through how to write a project, starting with the project topic, the table of content, the introduction section, the literature review, the methodology, the data analysis and preparation stuff, as well as the conclusion, summary, and recommendation. Yeah, so when writing a particular research project, you'll be given a particular topic to work on, basically a categorical data. This particular topic is on categorical data analysis and machine learning analysis for the spread and patterns of crimes in Nigeria. So basically what this particular person wants to do, though I did this project anyways, um, what this person wants to do is basically to identify the areas which high crimes and why they are actually crimes in that particular sections, particular regions with high crimes. Then what can we actually do to stop it? And it's actually a very good topic because if this gets to the right source, it might actually help to reduce the crime rate in the country. So moving on, the project was submitted to the Department of Mathematics, obviously my department, Faculty of Science, and Obafemi Awolowo University as well, in partial fulfillment to the requirement of bachelor's degree BSc. Okay, so moving on, the first section is going to be on the table of contents. I'm going to skip all this part. I'm only going to be referencing it when we actually want to move to the each chapters or sections. So moving on to the introduction section. Introduction is basically the background of study. Introduction section contains basically the background of study, and the background of study is basically the beginning of your research, talking about the inspiration behind your research, where you took the inspiration from. And you can see in this particular section, it wrote the Nigerian news scene has become a circus shown of crime reports and other unfortunate incidents. So this is basically the inspiration towards this particular research, and he highlighted some particular key areas, as well as the Nigerian independence adversaries in October 2010. These are the key news that actually happened that triggered his particular view towards that triggered this particular enthusiasm towards working on this particular research. And you can see a little some accidents like two car bombings were carried out against crowd attending the celebrities in Abuja on the independence, okay, on the 50th anniversary of independence in Abuja, and also the Saint Francis Catholic Church, and also elected some EndSARS protests in Lekki going back in 2020. Then under the background of study as well, we have the governor's response. Then after you've written on the background of study, which is basically the inspiration towards a particular project writing, then you move on to the statement of the problem, what you're actually trying to solve, your goal. And this particular project, he wrote, Nigeria has in recent years witnessed an alarming rise in various forms of crime. So this is particularly the statement of this problem. So it's basically talking about an alarming crime rate ranging from adoption, looting, and use of remote explosives in various demonstrations. Then moving on, it talks about the research questions. This is the particular questions we're going to be working on towards our analysis, basically in the chapter 4. So whenever you are writing a particular project, this is the particular these are the particular questions you're going to be working with. So the particular questions depend basically on your aim of study, like the statement of the research, for example. Statement of the problem that I wrote here is going to determine the questions you're going to be asking as well as the questions you're going to be solving. And in this particular case, you might be getting your data set from an external data source, such as like some websites, like for example, this particular project, I got the data set from Kaggle actually, but there are some in some cases there are some websites that are responsible for generating the data source. Since this is a government and basically a project on crime scene, there are some particular website that you can actually get your data sets from. Then you use it for the analysis. It's called the secondary data source. Then based on the objective of the study, you have aim of the study. So it's basically about your goal, and objective of the study is basically more like a rephrase of these questions towards modifying it to your particular objective. As you can see, the first question is talking about the frequency and pattern, and you can see in statistics when we're talking about frequencies and pattern, we're also talking about the trends. As you can see here, examine the frequency, prevalence, and trends of selected crime across the six geopolitical zones from across 10 years, basically from 2013 to 2023. And I want to believe the crime rate actually started increasing in Nigeria since 2010. That was when Boko Haram actually started in the country. So then the second objective is how has this crime rate how has how are these crime rates distributed across the six political zone, and basically by mere news and researches we actually notice that the crime rate is actually much more worse in the northern part of Nigeria. So basically it's going to be addressed by the second questions, talking about how are these crime rates being distributed. Okay, sorry, that's research question. The research objective is applying a cross tabulation to evaluate the association between crime types and political zone. So basically, this particular objective is built to answer this particular question is built to answer this particular objective. Sorry, and we all know that in statistics, a chi-square test is basically um, a measure of association between two categorical variables, and it's basically a test for relationship, and is sometimes used as a cross tabulations. For example, is between two categorical variables, basically. For example, geopolitical zones and whether or not a particular person commits a crime. Whether a particular person commits a crime, that means is a boolean variable, yes or no. I'm just making a reference. And the dichotomous variables are the six political zones we have. Then you might actually want to create a cross tab. Then moving on, develop a machine learning model to predict future crimes. So it can be a regression model, it can be a random forest, it can be decision tree. Any machine learning model of your choice, basically it can be a supervised model or a non-supervised model actually. And it's basically built to answer this particular question, and so on and so forth. I don't want to move to it. Then the significance of the study. Then these definition times are basically the key things actually highlighted in your chapter 1 so far. Then moving on to the chapter 2. Literature review. This is basically on someone else's project that has worked on something similar to yourself, and actually have to choose the closest one. And obviously, when writing your particular project, you have to include some paper research references, as you can see in this particular section. Sorry, you can see this are what I mean by paper research references. To back up your particular research, at least you can't be making some researches blindly. So whenever you make a statement in project writing, you have to back it up with some research references. As you can see, um, in this particular chapter 2 part of this project, he wrote, um, this is also a paper research reference. So we have the conceptual review in chapter 2. Basically it contains introduction, conceptual review, theoretical review, as well as the empirical review. So depending on what the lecturer actually or supervisor actually wants, some supervisors basically prefers empirical review before theoretical review. Some prefer theoretical to empirical, but conceptual review basically comes first. And some supervisors basically want the introductions in chapter 2 to be left out. Basically, they just want you to jump to the conceptual review, and of course they're going to have some subsegments which is basically relating to your particular project. Then moving on to the chapter 3, it's talking about the methodology as well. It's going to contain introduction, your data analysis techniques, the variables you used, the brief introduction to the models they are going to be using for your machine learning. Um, that is if your project actually includes machine learning projects. If it doesn't, your method of data analysis, that means it's going to include data analysis. Then your independence variables. And then the assumptions, since you are using a chi-square test as indicated in the question, you are going to talk about the chi-square test and the cross tabulation, and you're going to talk about the assumption as well, the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. And also you're going to write out the formula for a chi-square formula for a chi-square test, which is basically x squared equals to summation. This O is basically the observed value. This is basically the expected value squared divided by the expected value. This expected value is basically predicted value, and this O is the observed value. Then you test it against chi-square tables. If it meets your criteria, then you accept the null hypothesis. If it doesn't, you reject null hypothesis. But basically, that is if you want to do it manually. But if you want to do it using R programming or SPSS or any statistical package, there's something we call a p-value. You get a p-value, and all of it has been drafted by the software. You don't have to know deep into the calculations because it has calculated everything for you basically. Then we talk about the assumptions of your statistical method they're going to be using in this particular case, chi-square test. Then talk about the machine learning, of course. So basically, the machine learning model we are going to be using is basically the logistic regression, the random forest as well. They also use some evaluation techniques such as the AIC, which is the Alki care information criteria and Bayesian information criteria. They basically aim to arrive at the same conclusion. Then you also have the train and test model. Yeah, test and train and test. Basically, it's always 80-20 or 70-30. So majority of our data are basically used to train the model, while the a few percentage is test the model. Then moving on to the analysis. This is basically the aim of my this is basically what I'm trying to arrive at, basically the analysis and the report section as well as the summary. This is basically the aim because this is where most people actually don't really get it. So when going writing your project and you go to this section, you're going to talk about the introduction section, which is basically a reference to your objectives and as well as the research questions. So this chapter presents the analysis of the study. Good. That's a very good introduction because you are going to talk about the what you are trying to what you want to do in this particular chapter. And you see the next one is talking about the objective is to investigate the spread of the selected crimes. And you can see that this selected crime has been listed in chapter 1 in the background of the study, and this 10 years. Then the next thing he talked about is the stages of his analysis. Both descriptive statistics and categorical data analysis were conducted, and I've already briefly explained why he used categorical data analysis. Is because we're having categorical variables, and since you're using a chi-square test and a cross tabulation, which basically works for a categorical variable, and the machine learning model one of the machine learning models we are using is a logistic regression. Categorical data analysis is actually the best. So you can see he briefly talked about categorical data analysis as well in this particular section. Then descriptive statistics. Then once he generated the table, he wrote about it, tabulation table 4.1. Then this is the patch that I generated basically in Python. Then table 4.2, these are the 6 geopolitical zones. This is basically more buttressing the descriptive statistics. It's more like an exploratory data analysis basically. Then this is the cross tabulation, like I said, two categorical data analysis. These two categorical variables, this and across the 6 geopolitical zones. These are different crimes we have based on our study, and these are the 6 geopolitical zones. You can see that as adoption is basically common in the northwestern part of Nigeria. So this particular cross tabulation is actually useful, as you can see in this analysis. Allows us to allows us to get more granularity of our data sets, allowing us to detect the geopolitical zones with the least and high crime risk depending on the type of crime they're actually conducting, and we know how to counter it, reaching the government and the people in charge basically. This is another cross tabulation for 2013. This is okay, yeah, it's in 2 places actually. Then the chi-square test of independence. So you've got our chi-square value, degrees of freedom, and as well as our p-value. Since it's 0.8973, we actually have to reject null hypothesis, accepting that there is no association between the selected crimes and the regions. So basically, that means all the results we've gotten here basically is just by chance, as we have 0.5% confidence that we are going to get this result in the whole population as large. Then moving on. Then we did for 2015 as well, the same thing. So basically, we are going to do it for the whole 10 years. So it's going to be large, and I don't want to spend the whole time trying um, to waste our time. So basically, I'm going to move on to the machine learning aspects. So these are the evaluation metrics, the accuracy. So the higher the accuracy, the greater the, or you can actually use precision basically. So these are the accuracy and precision scores. These are the F1 scores. So since London Forest actually has the highest accuracy, that's 0.91%. So it means that we are basically 99% closer to achieving our prediction. So I also have the true positive. So this is basically the more of a type 1, type 2 error kind of thing. So this CP is basically true positive, true negative, false positive, and false negative. And this is more like the classification towards this is basically how well we predict the correct values, how well we predict the false values. Basically more of the actual value was false, but we predicted it as a true value. So then talking about the discussion of findings. So this particular section is basically more of a summary of what you actually got, what you can actually deduce from our analysis. Then you can see it talked about the okay, yeah, adoption limits at the most throughout the entire period. Basically from the from the cost tabulation from 2013 to 2023, adoption was the most. And yeah, I think it's actually better if it was actually drilled it down to the ones with the highest adoption rates. And you can see he did it here as well, saying that the Northwest centrally recorded the highest number of adoption. So it's actually better that way. Then move to chapter 5, basically summary, conclusion, and recommendation. And all our references that we use in the project's research is going to be listed down in one section. Sometimes called bibliography basically, but it's actually the same thing. So thank you very much for, and we have our appendix, and as well as yeah, our appendix basically. So thank you very much for watching. This appendix basically contains the codes we used. Thank you very much for watching, and I believe this video is going to help us when writing our projects and when starting up to begin project writing. If you have any questions, you can let me know as well. So thank you very much for watching, and have a nice day.